Welcome back to episode 4 of Little Rock Ridge. If you'd have told me at the start of the year that I'd have 1,500 subscribers and be hosting a collab with some of the biggest creators in our community, I'd have flicked you on the nose and told you to stop being so silly. But yet, here we are, and I'm extremely grateful to each and every one of you. Last week, Nerd Chacho plopped down an awesome flawless roller coaster, so if you missed it, you can click the card in the top right now. This week, I'm going nuts with backstage areas and getting my hands dirty with a spot of horticulture. Meanwhile, Kombat Wombat will be placing down our second flat ride, so stay tuned. I started off by creating a double height perimeter fence using the tall metal fence pieces. I used these to enclose the top section of the park. Next, I tarmacked the area, blending it with the existing path. I added the usual dirt around the edges to blend the two terrain paints. Time for that aforementioned horticulture. To block sightlines from inside the park, I decided to add some rolling hills. Nothing too extreme, of course, this isn't the flippin' Alps. As these hills would intersect the road, I decided to create the basis of a tunnel, which I would come back to later on. I used the foundation tool to create little shelves, which I could then blend with the smoothing tool. Time for some trees. I added some oak, ash, ponderosa pine, poplar and sycamore. As this is the main backstage area of the park, road access is essential. I extended the tarmac out to the edge of the park, where I will later build a service gate. As you know, our admin offices are by the park entrance, so back here you would find departments like groundskeeping and maintenance. I went for cookie cutter cabins with the wooden batten walls and corrugated metal roof. I decided to build a small porch, but later on decided it was a disgrace to the park and kicked it to the curb, shouting, "Get out of here!" Next I added some doors and windows, but used some art shapes to give them a more modern feel. I created an electrical box using more art shapes and a screen mount for the handle. Get out of here! If we had access to the Studios pack, this is where our utility vans would be parked. Regardless, I marked out some parking spaces with basic shapes. I then cordoned off an area for refuse and recycling. Back to that tunnel I mentioned earlier, I started off by creating the illusion of darkness using the colourable panels. For the tunnel itself, I used these concrete pieces, also known as Coaster Support 1 Small Footer Extension. Next, I shooed all of the exposed terrain back into the void it came from. Every tunnel needs ventilation. I used the Coaster Support 4 crossbeam as some rigging, and a couple of cargo canisters as fans. Every tunnel also requires some sort of traffic light system in case of emergency, so I made this using box lights. Presuming this is the UK, I need to pop these on the left side of the road where we've decided to drive for some reason. Moving over to the entrance, I quickly added some toilets, as that's kind of an essential thing to have. Putting their name to good use, I cookie cutted the cookie cutter building and plopped it over by the car park. I then used the same fencing as before to enclose this staff area. For the guest-facing side, I went with our usual plank fence as it's a bit more aesthetically pleasing. A bit more terrain paint before extending the height of our new fence. I then placed some trees and bushes in front to hide the backstage area as best as possible. Lastly, I replicated the service gate from the other side of the car park and reinforced the fencing to ensure no sneaky guests try to get in for free. We're in the capitalist game now, folks. With my bits done, it's time for our special guest. Kombat Wombat is a legend builder in the Channel 5 gaming community who is well known for his highly detailed and frankly gigantic Planet Coaster creations. Builds such as Palantos City of Dreams and the cyberpunk masterpiece that is Neo Tokyo. That's right, this guy built entire cities in Planet Coaster, so it's safe to say he doesn't do anything by halves. Kombat was tasked with building a ride skin for the Double Hammer, or as it's known in Planco, Insanity. Without further ado, over to the man himself to talk us through his build.
So, Moomin asked me to make a ride skin for his Western park he's working on. There was, of course, a catch in that no DLC items could be used, which presented quite a challenge. I have grown very accustomed to using DLC items for literally everything, and having to work without them was definitely a very unique challenge. But it was very fun as well, trying to learn to use the different pieces, or relearn to use the different pieces. I was honestly quite surprised how few pieces are actually in the base game. You really have to start thinking outside the box when you have so few pieces to work with. The ride he asked me to skin was the Insanity. This is actually a very good ride to make a ride skin for, as it's quite generic looking. It isn't already set to any specific theme, so you have a lot of freedom to work with it. I looked at the ride and to me it kind of, the shape of it and the way it moves, it kind of reminded me of like an oil well or pump. So I decided to try and make a ride themed to the oil rush. I'm not exactly sure if it's quite in the Old West, but right after, I think, really. Like the very late 1800s, very early 1900s, turn of the century time, I think, but I'm not entirely sure. But it definitely has kind of a Western aesthetic. So, except for like the big oil pump, which is basically what the ride looks like, I wasn't really sure what else to do. So I went to Google and I saw that, I'm not entirely sure what you call it, tower thing with the big, where the oil kind of whooshes out at the top, and decided that would be another really good part to build. And from the old black and white pictures from the time, they all looked like they were basically falling apart, so I wanted to build them kind of really, build the whole thing really rickety looking, like if you accidentally kick the wrong plank, then the whole thing's just going to come crashing down. Once I built the big tower, I wanted to build some tanks, basically, where you'd hold the unprocessed oil. I'm not exactly sure of the intricacies of refining oil in the Old West, but I decided some big tanks would look good, and I saw on the pictures they kind of had some tank-like structures, so I decided to actually use the water towers that are already in the game and just kind of sink them into the ground so they're just above the ground, and colour them kind of a more darker colour, and they kind of fit quite well. I also noticed, only after I was actually quite far into making the build, that Planet Coaster actually has an oil pump as a scenery piece which moves, so I decided to also raise the ride just up a bit above the ground. It just looks better when there's slightly different heights of things, I think, and it makes the queue look more interesting when there's some height differences on the queue as well. I built a little shed where the queue goes through. It's also connected to the big tower, The queue goes through the shed and there's a little workshop inside. There's some animatronics, some cowboys standing around the workshop not really doing their job. There's also another little shed to the other side where there's not really anything in there, but you could imagine that's where you'd maybe have more like backstage stuff, maybe some spare parts, a little place to store little spare parts for maintenance and so on. I didn't really do interior to those buildings because, you know, you're going to see them anyway. I don't think we have the pieces without DLC or TMTK to do something like that. So that's pretty much the build. Finally added, you know, some fences and slapped a lot of planks on at random angles just to make it all look kind of all slapped together quickly. Make it look like something that's just quickly been put up in very little time by, you know, some cowboys. I named the ride Black Gold. Seemed fitting for the theme, and yeah, that's basically the ride. So I hope you like it. Thank you very much to Moomin for letting me be a part of this amazing project. I'm really looking forward to seeing the end result. Thank you to everyone for watching, and goodbye.
As expected, Kombat Wombat did not disappoint. A fine addition to the edge of Little Rock Ridge. Next week I'll be doing some more work to the exterior, and our next guest will be doing something with things. Okay, I don't know what it is yet, but one thing's for sure, it'll be great. See you then. Say goodbye, Kombat Wombat.
Goodbye.